If my sermon is half as good as Gabe's anthem, I will be doing just fine. Gabe, that was absolutely fabulous. Thanks again. You know, Advent is a time in the church that we prepare our hearts and we hear ancient prophecies from the Hebrew Bible that we graft onto the story of Jesus. It's also the time that we hear and hold on to that Jesus will yet return to make right that which has been wrong. It's also the time in the year that I normally take 4 Sundays off to be with my family. That said, when I received this invitation, I immediately accepted, and my family sends their regards, though they are not here today, because you all have come to feel like family to me. I'm so grateful that my family made space for me to be here and be away during this season, and that you all welcome me as you do. It just feels so right. It feels so right. Won't you pray with me? God of the coming dawn, as redeeming grace is on the horizon, might we come to know you better by those whom you have called us to serve. This we ask in your name. Amen. There's this Netflix hit show on right now that made a splash late this year, and it's called Nobody Wants This. Maybe some of you have seen this show. The show tells the story of a Jewish rabbi played by Adam Brody who falls in love with a podcaster who talks about sex, family, life, all in between, played by Kristen Bell. Her sex-positive podcast show is both raunchy and unkept. And he is an up-and-coming rabbi. He's an up-and-coming standing person, and she is just pure chaos. He's the rabbi. She's a Gentile. In the eyes of the synagogue, that's not going to go well. This is not supposed to happen. Everybody knows that nobody wants this. In some ways, in many ways, nobody in their right mind wants to be a bishop. You couldn't pay me all the money in the world to be a bishop. In fact, I would be gravely concerned had Durrell or Robert sought out such a high office or place in the church by themselves. To be clear, as the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, said, if we aren't self-created, which we believed we aren't, then the answer to a truth that is not our own. We answer to a truth that is not our own. You, bishops, answer to a truth that is not your own. Today, you, the church, proclaims that Robert and Durrell have answered a call they could not have made on their own, even if they wanted to. They have been made bishops of Christ's church, and they have been consecrated worthy of their callings to be bearers of a story. They have been ordained bishops just as they were baptized into the faith, and just as they were ordained ministers not too many years ago. You know, the Reverend Barbara Brown Taylor, an Episcopal priest and prolific writer, puts it this way: being ordained is not about serving God perfectly, but about serving God visibly, allowing other people to learn whatever they can from watching you rise and fall. Now, I don't mean that to put pressure on you two, though there is a certain amount of pressure in being bishops, but we're watching. And we need your leadership now more than ever. You know, in the portion of the book of Acts that we don't normally hear in Advent, but we heard today, we see something peculiar that should haunt us as a church and should haunt these 2 bishops that are now about to take on their role and sit in their seats of the cathedral. I hope I might focus in on it for a bit. It's the last verse of the text where it says, and every day the Lord added to their number those who were being spiritually emancipated. What should truly haunt you and liberate you, I think, in this text is that the rising and the falling of this church, of the church, is not up to you two. And very little of your success in this world will be up to you all collectively. Sunshine Cathedral is what it is today because God saw a need in Fort Lauderdale and filled it by conjoining together a ragtag group of people who dreamed of a different and more righteous way of doing life together. Your anger, whether you have it or not, at the church or at your clergy for its decision that it makes here or the decision that it makes here, or your anger at your bishops over whether they do good or don't do good, it doesn't really matter because it doesn't determine the church's success. Conversely, if you decide to heap on praise on these two, that doesn't work either. And it will not magnify the success of this institution. So what should we do if God's work in the world is not predicated on our abilities or inabilities to cause this place to rise and to fall? Let me propose to you that you might get your green thumb out and that you might garden. Gardening is the first vocation of humanity. It's as contained in the scriptures as the first thing that we did. We tended a garden. I love the story that Dr. Amy Jill Levine tells. She's a preeminent Jewish scholar of the New Testament and is often confronted by those people who want to change her and convert her to Christianity, and they sometimes threaten her with hell. She responds by telling folk, if they're willing to listen, that when we get to the place where we're all headed, someone, we'll call him Steve, might realize there's someone who ought not to be in heaven right in front of them in the line. Before the person in front of him can get through the gates, Steve raises his hand and protests that there is a person who should not gain entry into heaven. They should not get the reward of the hereafter. Steve lists all the reasons and demands that he speaks to someone above St. Peter, who is clearly in middle management in this story. Suddenly, a gardener tending the gates stands up and offers to determine the fate of the person. Now, Steve is incensed. He is scoffing at this person, supposing him to be the gardener, just as Mary Magdalene did long ago. But then quickly he realizes who he's dealing with and starts to explain his plight to Jesus, the gardener, the very gardener that he was trying to argue with. Jesus sighs with the old argument and responds, I let you handle down there. Now you let me handle up here. Trust me when I say I'll do a better job. Too often we think of bishops as these lofty figures above the fray of the church drama, dictating their wishes and their rulings to God's gathered people, which I don't think would go entirely well here, but that's what we think of. I hope and pray for you, Durrell and Robert, that you will continue to be gardeners rather than dogmatic demagogues. I hope and pray that you too might continue to choose compassion over certainty. I hope and pray that you might show your power as bishops through your mercy. I hope you might show your vulnerability and therefore be trustworthy. Bishop Will Willimon, my advisor when I was at Duke Divinity School, remarks that being a bishop for him was a faith-engendering experience. I want to continue with that analogy for just a second with the right's hyperfixation on gender. What might it look like for Representative Nancy Mace or the president-elect to meet our two bishops, our two married gay bishops? Talk about a crisis of faith for them, but more to the point, your very existence, your very ordination, your very serving this very church is subverting an empire. It's showing a different way. It's showing the way that God intends for the world. You are suggesting to the world that this garden is more imperative to our existence than the marble halls of power and those who inhabit it. Friends, you're suggesting, you're proclaiming, you're preaching, everything you do, you're playing, you're singing, everything you do, you are saying that gay people are not to be avoided or condemned, but embraced and celebrated for the God-created person they are. You're reminding us all, every single one of us who comes through those two doors right there, that this is a big place that needs love to fill in the gaps in the lines of the song that we've long since forgotten. More pressingly, we need you because it's getting dark out there. We need you two, bishops of the Church of God, because you can remind us that though the world is broken and bruised to the bone, there is still potential for us, the church, to get up and do what needs to be done for the children, the widow, and the orphan. Frankly, bishops, we need you to remind us of the heart of God. We need you to remind us of the big, big heart of a living, liberating God. But if my sermon does have any warnings to you all bishops and to the church today, it's not to get caught up as the apostles did in the book of Acts. At the very first portion of our text, there's men in white who come to the apostles and asks why their heads are stuck looking at the clouds. Howard Thurman famously reminded students that they should not be so heavenly minded that they do no earthly good. Or as Dr. King said in Memphis the night before he died, it's all right to talk about long white robes over yonder in all of its symbolism. But ultimately, people want some shirts and shoes and dresses and to wear down here. It's all right to talk about a land flowing of milk and honey, but God has commanded us to be concerned about the slums down here and his children who can't eat 3 square meals a day. It's all right to talk about the new Jerusalem, but one day God's preacher must talk about the new New York, the new Atlanta, the new Philadelphia, the new Los Angeles, the new Memphis, Tennessee. This is what we have to do. People of God, we live in a world that has Christians more concerned with the security of heaven than with the vulnerability of the Garden of Gethsemane. We'd prefer our God neatly boxed up in a bow under the tree so that when God starts calling to us in discomforting or challenging ways, we can put the lid back on God and sink back into the comfort of our nice robes and our luxury. But this season of Advent reminds us that God cannot be held in a box and should not be relegated to the first century in Bethlehem. God's work in the world is both beyond time and in time, sometimes just in time. Both with us and both for us, both co-authored by us and through us. This is the story of that night long ago we'll celebrate at the end of this month. God took a ramshackle feeding trough and made it the cradle of the greatest king this world has ever seen. If we're so consumed looking to the heavens, we might miss the child in the manger. Don't miss the child in the manger. One of the things that I've loved most about Durrell and Robert and my getting to know them is their ability to talk a big game. But at their hearts, they are pastors. And indeed, bishops we call chief pastors. So I've watched your services online from home. It's fun to do. It's great production value. I love it. For some time now, it's been hilarious for me to watch Bishop Durrell give different names to a child. I believe his name is CJ, accurately, but it's been Cleophas and all these other names. I got lost there. There were so many varied names. I didn't even think I knew the name. I had to check with some people to make sure I know. But let me tell you why I think that's important. I think the beauty of this newborn child disarmed the mighty bishop in some ways. Because a church with children in it is a church that is succeeding. A church that has a child crying in it is something to be celebrated, not something to be sent away. In the best of ways, we see this mighty bishop do what he does best: pastor. And it points to a larger truth that I hope I might harp on for a moment. Jürgen Moltmann, one of the great theologians of the 20th century, suggested that we should not call God omnipotent or all-powerful, because you cannot love that which is all-powerful. Rather, Moltmann suggests that God's infleshing and engendering in Jesus through his time and his place proves that God is above omnipotence and well beyond the concept of an all-powerful deity that we can conceive of. After all, incarnation proves empathy. Empathy is something that power can never understand. So bishops, if you hear anything from me today, remember your empathy. Remember that there have been priests and pastors and bishops who have come before you, who have shown you the way to do what you do now, because you have been called to lead for this moment. Remember that a baby born 2 millennia ago inspired and just cooed that right way, so that 2 gay pastors in 2024 were made bishops of a church that follows in the footsteps of that baby. If that's not earth-shattering, if that's not proof of an empathetic and loving God who celebrates love, who lives in love, who died by love, and who was resurrected by love, I don't know what love is. It is marvelous that God is so mischievous and so cantankerous that not even elections can stop what we're doing right now. Now, I know I got to get sitting down. I got an email saying I needed to be brief. Back to what I first told you of that new Netflix hit, Nobody Wants This. The show has been renewed for a second season, by the way, so you've got time to catch up on it if you want. But it points to a deeper truth that I want to leave you to and you all with. In the show, Joanne, the sex-affirming podcaster played by Kristen Bell, is forced to confront those things which make her the very essence of who she is. And some of those things make her incredibly insecure. That's because she's dating Rabbi Noah, played by Adam Brody, who is also having to confront the fact that he loves a woman who could ruin his chances at advancement and honor in his profession. I found myself wanting to yell at the TV, "Choose each other, screw the job." Life is full of choices, and choosing each other will always rue the day. That said, in one of the scenes of this episode that I particularly love, Joanne is feeling what's called the ick, which is described as the early point in a relationship where someone does something that causes the other person in the relationship to give pause, because it's just so icky or peculiar or weird. As this happens for Joanne, Noah looks at her after realizing his own place in causing the ick, grabs her on the shoulders and says, "You're safe." This causes Joanne to realize that much of her ick had been her own junk personified onto Rabbi Noah. Bishops Durrell and Robert, you are my friends. And I'm so proud of you and what you're doing today and what you've already accomplished in your years of ministry here. But your job will be to continue to remind the gathered people, all these people, turn around just for a second, look at all these people. They're here for you today too. Your job is to remind these gathered people here that they are safe, just as Noah did to Joanne. You stand as a lighthouse to remind people who have felt the worst ick of the church, the worst that the church can offer, that there is another better way to love God. There's another way to be in fellowship with one another. There's another way to love your neighbor as yourself. It's quite obvious that there have been moments of incredible harm perpetrated against your community, both collectively and individually. It's not lost on me that today is World AIDS Day, and there should be a hell of a lot more people here than there are, even in this large crowd. Yet today, for a moment, Durrell and Robert, you might say to those in the community who have seen hell that this cathedral will be a place of encampment and of safety. This will be a cathedral that is a garden as the world burns. The prophet Malachi asks the question, who can endure the day of the Lord's coming? Well, if I were a betting man, I'd say gardens have the best chance. I would wager that the places of safety and encampment stand a better place and chance than most at survival. I would say the Lord may come, yes, but it would be to plant with you all rather than to destroy. God's too loving to destroy, friends. And we should follow in those footsteps because people get ready. Jesus is coming. And bishops, it's our hope that you will lead us on the way. All glory, honor, and power be to the one who was, who is, and who is to come. Amen.
We have a surprise. We might not have informed everybody, but that's what makes it a surprise. The first thing we did, of course, we wanted to do after our celebration here, we were installed in this ministry on October the 20th, Robert's birthday, in New York. But we wanted the grand celebration here at home. So we haven't worn any of our regalia until you put it on us, and haven't really made much of it other than just letting you know about it until today. So now that's done, we wanted to do a couple of things right off. The first thing is we wanted to celebrate communion together, and we have done. And the next thing is, for the first time, when Robert and I came, we were installed as canons. I was the canon presenter. He was the dean of what was then Light University. It's now the Samaritan Institute. And the place was full of cannons. It looked like a battery. It was there was a canon. What was the money guy? The canon chancellor, and there was another canon presenter before I came, and so on. There was the canon pastor, a canon missioner. It was very Anglican, and that sort of all just faded away. And so we are, for the first time in almost 20 years, are installing a canon of the cathedral, and that would be our canon theologian, the Reverend Dr. Rob Lee IV. So virtually and in person, you will be seeing more of him over the years. We sometimes do a prayer blessing, but I think your enthusiasm, love, and presence is quite the blessing. So consider yourself blessed and installed, Canon Rob Lee.